phone screen glowed in the dark, its light cutting through silence like a blade. Emily's heart skipped when she saw the message that read last seen at your address, 2:11 a.m. She whispered, "That's impossible." Her apartment was locked, blinds drawn tight, and she had been asleep. A chill spread across her skin as she checked her notifications. Daniel had sent a photo hours earlier, a selfie she remembered saving, but this one carried a timestamp 10 minutes after she blocked him. Emily thought, how could he post again with the same background, the same smirk, yet the clock doesn't match? Her mind raced. Was it duplication or proof he was still watching? She scrolled back and froze at the contradiction. One image tagged in her neighborhood, though Daniel claimed he was traveling. The fear was not in his words, but in the evidence, undeniable and precise. Something was wrong, and it had crossed from flirtation into violation. Emily whispered, "This doesn't make sense." The contradiction drilled into her mind like static. She remembered blocking Daniel after his last unnerving message, yet here was proof of his persistence. She wanted to believe it was some glitch, but her gut told her otherwise. The timestamp mocked her, precise and deliberate. She thought of how careful she had been, blinds drawn, doors locked, phone tucked by her pillow. Still, he found a way in digitally, slipping past her boundaries like smoke through a crack. Fear pressed on her chest as she recalled his flattery just days ago, words that felt safe then, but now carried a sinister weight. "You can't ignore me," he once teased. Now, it echoed in her head, reframed as a threat. She tightened her grip on the phone, pulse hammering against her wrist, as if the device itself had become contaminated by his presence. The room felt smaller with each passing second. Emily remembered Daniel's voice message, playful yet pressing, saying, "I need you to listen only to me." At the time it sounded like romance, but now her memory twisted it into something darker. The contradiction between timestamps gnawed at her. She recalled scrolling through his profile, his curated charm, a reader, a traveler, a man who knew what women wanted to hear. She whispered, "It's too perfect, it's not real." Her instinct screamed, but doubt crept in. Was she overreacting, being dramatic? She wanted to trust herself, yet Daniel's digital trail had made her second-guess reality. Every ding of her phone carried dread. She locked the screen but felt no safety, as though closing the app couldn't close the threat. The betrayal was not just in his persistence, but in her own shaking uncertainty. Emily scrolled further, heart pounding, until her stomach dropped. Daniel's caption read just outside her place. Her pulse thrashed. The photo was the same smile, but tagged only blocks away. He had promised he was traveling, out of state, too busy to meet. She gasped, whispering, "He lied." This wasn't miscommunication, it was invasion. She pulled the blanket around her shoulders like armor, but the chill wouldn't fade. Every word he'd written before now felt like manipulation. "You're safest when you're only with me." The realization hit. He wasn't declaring love, he was dictating control. Fear coursed through her veins, yet a spark of clarity rose. This was proof, not paranoia. A concrete contradiction she could not ignore. The silence pressed harder than any sound. Emily's mind replayed their chats, each line now twisted. The compliments had always arrived in floods. "You're perfect, no one else deserves you." At first, she basked in them. Now they sounded like warnings. She whispered, "He was isolating me all along." The weight of his words landed. His notes hadn't been love. They were instructions. Instructions to shrink her circle, to distance from friends, to give him complete access. Her throat tightened as she realized he had built the cage before she noticed the lock. The contradiction in his timeline was her escape hatch, a sign she couldn't dismiss. She exhaled, a shaky breath cutting through the stillness. The dread was real, and so was the danger. Emily sat at her kitchen table with untouched coffee cooling beside her. She thought about how hopeful she had been when she first downloaded the app. She had told herself she was ready to try again after the breakup, to believe that love might still be possible. Daniel's profile had felt like fate, filled with quotes from books she adored, and jokes that matched her humor. She remembered the thrill of their first midnight chat, how his words felt like safety in a new city where she knew no one. Her heart wanted kindness, companionship, someone who would see her fully. That was the soft spot he pressed on, the reason she overlooked small red flags. She whispered, "I just wanted to belong." The sting of betrayal came sharp as she recalled seeing Daniel use the exact same unique line on another profile. Her phone buzzed with old messages she couldn't delete. She scrolled back to the start, reading how Daniel had typed "good morning" every day without fail. At first it had felt like devotion, a gentle rhythm that carried her through lonely mornings. She smiled back then, believing consistency meant security. Now the words looked mechanical, rehearsed, an echo of effort, not heart. Emily thought about the times she had told her friends she was finally safe, finally seen. She remembered one friend warning her to take it slow, but she brushed it off. The charm felt too strong to resist, too perfectly timed to question. She sighed, realizing it wasn't romance but strategy. She whispered, "He knew exactly what I needed to hear." Emily remembered the first time Daniel asked her to cancel plans with friends. He had said, "Stay in tonight, just us," and she had convinced herself it was sweet. The warmth of his words made her feel chosen, special. Over time the requests multiplied, each framed as love, but they quietly cut her away from her circle. She realized he had mapped her loneliness and used it like a blueprint. The part of her that craved belonging was turned against her. She whispered, "I didn't notice until it was too late." Every love note she replayed in her mind now carried an unspoken command. It wasn't safety he offered, it was solitude disguised as care. Her chest ached at how quickly she had traded laughter with friends for silence with him. Her memory flashed to the night they matched. She had been sitting by the window, rain streaking down glass, when his first message popped up. He quoted the same obscure novel she had written about on her profile. It felt uncanny, like destiny, and she smiled at her reflection in the dark glass. Emily whispered, "It felt like someone finally understood me." That line had been her anchor, the thing she repeated to friends when she explained why she trusted him so quickly. But seeing the same words appear on another woman's profile shattered it. It wasn't fate, it was a script. Her cheeks burned with shame, yet beneath it a sharper truth rose. She had been targeted, not chosen. Emily leaned back against her chair, pressing her palms over her eyes. She wanted to believe she had imagined it all, that Daniel wasn't the predator her gut now screamed he was. But every contradiction weighed heavy. The timestamps, the copied lines, the way his devotion carried conditions. Her heart still ached for the early days, when his attention felt like sunlight, but she saw it clearly now. It wasn't kindness but control. She whispered, "I thought he saw me, but he only saw what he could use." The sting of betrayal was sharper because it grew out of hope. She felt the loss not only of him but of her own trust. Yet in the hollow ache, she sensed the first stir of defiance. Emily stared at Daniel's latest message until her eyes blurred. He wrote, "You are my entire world, but only if you stop letting others distract you." The words felt sticky, praise wrapped tightly around a warning. She remembered how his notes once made her heart swell, pages of adoration pouring in like summer rain. Now she saw the subtle turn, the shift from romance into regulation. He asked where she was every hour, demanded photos of her meals, disguised his surveillance as care. When she replied late he sulked, filling her inbox with wounded pleas. She thought back to when his silence made her worry for him, but now it served as punishment for her. The phone vibrated again, sharp against the wooden desk, and her stomach dropped with dread. She whispered, "This isn't love, it's control." The realization settled heavy in her chest. Each ping had become a leash. The sweetness had turned sour, and Emily felt it in every message. Daniel once called her perfect in endless streams of flattery, but now his words came with conditions. He told her she was beautiful only when she answered quickly, only when she agreed to his wishes. When she pushed back, his voice vanished into silence, a silence that screamed louder than anger. Emily canceled dinner plans with co-workers, twice because she knew he would sulk otherwise. She told herself it was temporary, that he just needed reassurance, but deep down she knew he was rewriting her habits. She stared at her reflection in the window, city lights flickering behind her, and realized she no longer recognized herself. She whispered, "I'm disappearing piece by piece." The space she once filled with laughter was now occupied by the fear of disappointing him. His love felt like rationed air, given or taken at his whim. Daniel turned technology into shackles. He demanded read receipts like confessions, scolding if minutes passed without a reply. The typing bubble became a performance, stretching on for an hour before disappearing, leaving Emily sick with suspense. Her phone lit up with Venmo requests carrying cryptic notes, "Dinner for us or you belong with me." Once she found it quirky, but now it read like ownership disguised as playfulness. She rubbed her temples, her head aching from the constant vigilance. Every notification was no longer communication, but a test she could fail. Emily whispered, "I'm not free, I'm monitored." Her pulse raced as she stared at the glowing screen, exhausted from chasing a moving target. The relationship had become a game with rules she never agreed to, one she could not win. What began as romance had hardened into surveillance. Coincidence began to dissolve into design. Emily sat in her favorite cafe when Daniel appeared at her table smiling like it was fate. He claimed he was nearby, but she had never told him where she went. Another day he commented on the weather near her office, though she had never shared her address. A second number texted her late at night with the same odd commas he always used, the same misplaced pauses. She whispered, "It's him." She remembered when he convinced her to share locations for safety. Now she saw the truth. Safety was surveillance. Each overlap was not accident but architecture, built to make escape impossible. She stirred her coffee with shaking hands, heart pounding as she realized she had been mapped, tracked, and shadowed. Her chest tightened with dread. The net was no longer invisible. It was closing. The unraveling came late one night when Emily opened her laptop. She dropped Daniel's photo into a reverse image search and waited. Within seconds her screen filled with results. His same smile stared back at her from multiple accounts, each carrying recycled captions, each sharing the same jokes, with identical typos. Her stomach turned. He had not written for her, he had written for everyone. She whispered, "He's not real, he's a script." She thought of the sleep she lost, the friends she ignored, the lies she believed. She felt her world tilt as the truth landed heavy. Daniel was not unique, he was duplication, a manufactured persona used again and again. The betrayal hit deeper than anger, cutting through her hope, leaving only clarity. She no longer doubted her instincts. What she had feared was undeniable. The mask had begun to slip. Emily's pulse hammered as she stared at the search results. Profile after profile showed Daniel's same face, same smirk, but with different names and cities. Each page was a thread unraveling the illusion he had woven. She whispered, "He's not one person, he's a dozen." His devotion had never been singular, it had been rehearsed across strangers. She scrolled further and found the same captions he had once sent to her, copy-pasted to other women. The unique attention that made her feel chosen was now exposed as recycled lies. The warmth of memory curdled into dread. She clenched her jaw, fighting tears. He had not stumbled into her life by chance, he had constructed an identity to target her. The twist was undeniable. His mask had slipped and beneath it was not love, but calculation. She dug deeper into timestamps and saw a chilling pattern. The captions aligned with the exact hours he had claimed to be talking only to her. While she poured out secrets in private, he was posting the same words publicly under other guises. Emily whispered, "It was never real." Her fingers shook as she clicked through screenshots, saving each one as evidence. A slip of vocabulary connected accounts she had thought separate, his odd phrasing repeating like a signature. She thought back to the nights he told her he couldn't sleep without her voice. At those very times he had been messaging others. The betrayal was so sharp it took her breath. Every phrase that once steadied her now felt like poison, weaponized for control. The contradictions multiplied until her screen looked like a wall of mirrors. Emily gasped when she noticed that one account used a photo of Daniel, tagged at a location he swore he had never visited. Another listed him as living in a different state entirely. She whispered, "He built a network, not a relationship." The thought chilled her. This wasn't sloppy flirting. This was strategy. She thought of how precisely he had targeted her, echoing her favorite quotes, mimicking her rhythms, inserting himself as the answer she thought she needed. But the same script was running everywhere, each woman cast as prey. The man who promised devotion had been nothing more than a chameleon, hiding behind names that weren't his. The twist was complete. He was not a boyfriend. He was a fabrication. Emily remembered the moment he mentioned a childhood nickname she had never typed online. Her chest tightened at the realization. This was not random catfishing. This was targeted. Someone close to her must have leaked information or given him access. She whispered, "He shouldn't know that name." Her breath came sharp as the terror deepened. It was not only digital but personal. She recalled the mutual friend who brushed off her doubts, who always seemed to defend him. The pieces connected with dread. Daniel was not alone in this. Someone had been feeding him the details that pierced her defenses. It reframed everything. This was not fate. It was conspiracy. And she was the mark. The truth weighed on her like stone. Daniel's charm was not real, his devotion was not real, and even his identity was fractured into masks. What chilled Emily most was the realization that he had studied her, learned her soft spots, and twisted them into tools. She whispered, "He was never in love, he was in control." Her fear sharpened into clarity. Fake profiles, the timestamps, the stolen words were more than lies, they were evidence. For the first time she stopped asking if she was dramatic or paranoid. The contradiction was unshakable. His mask was gone. Beneath it was something cold and calculating, a predator who built intimacy like a trap. The danger was no longer invisible. It stood exposed, undeniable. Emily sat in silence, her laptop glowing with rows of screenshots. She whispered, "This ends tonight." For the first time, she gathered not fear, but resolve. Every duplicate profile, every message, every timestamp became part of her arsenal. She created a folder marked evidence and felt her hands steady. Her heart still raced, but it no longer drowned her. She thought of the women she saw on the other accounts, strangers linked by the same lies. Her pain was not isolated, it was part of a pattern. The thought gave her strength. Daniel's control thrived in secrecy, but his mask was now fragile. She whispered, "Receipts don't lie." The confrontation ahead would be dangerous, but she no longer cared about his approval. She cared about her freedom. Her phone buzzed again, Daniel's name flashing across the screen. Emily hesitated but answered. His voice was honeyed at first, asking why she hadn't replied. When she stayed silent, his tone hardened. "Don't make me regret trusting you," he said. She gripped the phone tighter and replied, "I have proof." For a moment, there was only static. Then his words turned sharp. "You think anyone will believe you?" he hissed. Emily's throat tightened, but she pressed on. "They'll believe the screenshots," he sputtered, shifting between threats and pleas, bargaining with her silence. The mask cracked. He knew she was no longer playing the role he wrote for her. The conversation ended not with his charm, but with her decision to act. Emily reached out to her closest ally, her friend Claire. She opened the door to find Claire staring at her with concern. Emily whispered, "I need help." Together they sat at the kitchen table, the screen between them. Emily showed the fake profiles, the repeated captions, the timestamps. Claire's face hardened. "This isn't just bad behavior, this is predatory," she said. For the first time, Emily felt believed without question. The isolation Daniel had built began to fracture. Claire suggested, "We'll compile everything. We'll make it impossible for him to twist. Emily felt tears sting her eyes, not from fear but from relief. She wasn't alone anymore. The receipts were no longer just hers to carry. The confrontation escalated through messages. Daniel wrote long streams of apologies, bargaining for silence. "I only wanted you, you misunderstood," he pleaded. Then, the tone shifted into menace. "If you expose me, I'll expose you." Emily stared at the words, her pulse pounding. She whispered, "You have nothing on me but lies." She copied the messages into her evidence folder, every threat preserved. Claire placed a hand on her shoulder and said, "This is proof of everything." Daniel's power was crumbling, shifting wildly between charm and intimidation. Emily realized his strength depended on secrecy, and secrecy was gone. The more he wrote, the more evidence he left behind. The breaking point came when Emily pressed send on her report. She uploaded screenshots to the platform's safety team, her hands trembling but steadying as the progress bar filled. Daniel's last message flashed across her phone, a desperate line of rage and denial. But she no longer froze. She whispered, "It's over." The decisive act was irreversible. A door slammed shut. For the first time since meeting him, she felt the smallest breath of safety return. His threats no longer echoed in isolation. They were captured, documented, and shared. Claire hugged her tightly, and Emily let the tears fall. It wasn't victory yet, but it was the first step toward freedom. She had chosen her line and stood on it. Emily woke to silence, and for the first time in weeks, it did not feel threatening. She checked her phone and saw the notification. Account removed for policy violations. Her breath caught, and then steadied. Daniel's face no longer hovered over her feed. His aliases dismantled one by one. She whispered, "He's gone." Relief was not pure. It came mixed with anger and grief. The damage he caused was still raw. The trust he broke still aching. But the system had finally answered her with consequence. She wasn't invisible anymore. For the first time, the danger wasn't hers alone to carry. It was documented and judged. She closed her eyes and felt a weight begin to lift, even if only slightly. Emily sat with Claire at the kitchen table again, this time not in panic, but in quiet reflection. They scrolled through the evidence one last time before archiving it. Claire said, "You did this, you stopped him." Emily whispered, "I just wanted it to end." The anger she carried bubbled, but no longer consumed her. Claire reminded her that predators thrive on silence, and she had broken that pattern. Emily realized the folder of screenshots wasn't just proof. It was a barrier against him. She wasn't trapped anymore. She had built something stronger than his manipulation. She allowed herself to breathe without fear that every vibration of her phone was him pulling strings. Emily walked to her favorite cafe, a place she had avoided for weeks after Daniel appeared there. This time she stepped inside without her chest tightening. She ordered coffee, sat near the window, and for once her phone stayed face down on the table. She whispered, "I can take this back." The world outside the glass looked ordinary again, not staged or watched. She felt the absence of constant vigilance, the quiet gift of being unseen. The safety wasn't absolute, but it was hers to rebuild. Every sip tasted like defiance, proof that her life no longer belonged to him. She felt the threads of normalcy weaving slowly back into her days. At night, Emily lay in bed and realized she no longer checked the window every 5 minutes. The blinds swayed faintly with the breeze, but her chest remained still. Her phone rested on the nightstand, not clutched in her hand. She whispered, "I can sleep again." Dreams still carried fragments of his voice, but they no longer jolted her awake. She was relearning how to exist without the echo of his control. Each small moment of rest became a victory. The silence of the room wasn't heavy anymore. It was gentle, a blanket she could sink into. Safety wasn't dramatic, it was ordinary. And ordinary felt like a gift. Messages began arriving from others. Women who had seen Daniel's accounts and recognized his words wrote to Emily. They thanked her for exposing him, for giving shape to the confusion they felt. Emily read each one with a mixture of sorrow and solidarity. She whispered, "We weren't alone." The chorus of voices made the ordeal mean something beyond her survival. The harm could not be erased, but it could be transformed. She realized safety was not just about locks or reports, but about community, about refusing to let darkness stay hidden. In their thanks she found her own closure. His grip was gone, replaced with something stronger, something collective. Emily sat on her balcony at dusk, the air cool and tinged with the smell of rain. She thought about how her story began with a single detail that felt harmless, a notification, a smile on a profile, a good morning that became habit. Those words had once felt like light in her loneliness, a spark she had let grow until it blinded her. She whispered, "I wanted to believe in love, not control." Her phone buzzed, but this time she didn't flinch. It was Claire checking in, a message that read, "How are you sleeping?" She smiled faintly, realizing she no longer measured time by his presence or absence. Daniel's words no longer dictated her rhythms. Instead, she thought about how many nights she had missed watching sunsets, how many mornings she had wasted scrolling for proof of his attention. Now the ordinary was no longer ordinary. Every sip of coffee, every breath of cool evening air, every small choice felt reclaimed. The chains he forged out of love notes had been broken, one contradiction at a time. She whispered, "I am not his story anymore." Thought was both terrifying and freeing, because she now understood that her life belonged only to her, not to the mask he wore. Emily scrolled through the folder of evidence one last time before closing it. The screenshots that once burned her eyes now felt like armor. Each image was proof, not of his power, but of her survival. She whispered, "You can't erase me." Daniel's profiles were gone, stripped from the platform, but she knew others might appear. Still, she was no longer the same. Every pattern she once ignored was now etched into her instincts. A delayed reply wouldn't frighten her, it would warn her. A recycled line wouldn't flatter, it would expose. His scripts had become her alarm bells. She thought about the women who reached out to her, each carrying their own scars, their own stories. Together, they were no longer silent. Emily realized that while Daniel had tried to isolate her, he had instead connected her to something stronger, a chorus of voices refusing to be erased. She whispered, "He thought control was victory, but the truth will always be louder." And in that whisper was a kind of justice, quiet but enduring, like a scar that doesn't vanish but proves healing. Emily walked along the quiet street at night, phone tucked in her pocket. Every corner she once scanned for him now felt lighter. She thought of how he had once written, "I just want to keep you safe," words she repeated to herself as proof of love. Now she knew they were chains. His love notes had been instructions, his silence had been punishment, his devotion had been surveillance. She whispered, "He built a cage out of words, and I lived in it." But now the locks were gone. She passed a cafe window and caught her reflection, shoulders straight, eyes sharp, and realized she was no longer the same woman who once trembled over timestamps. She remembered his threats, his smug selfies, his contradictions, and realized they no longer had power. Each contradiction had become evidence, each manipulation turned against him. She whispered, "He doesn't own my story." And as she walked into the night, the city lights no longer felt like eyes watching her, but like stars guiding her forward. Emily sat with Claire in her living room, laughter spilling for the first time in months. They talked about ordinary things, movies, work, the taste of burnt coffee. The silence between them felt easy, not heavy. Emily whispered, "This is what safe feels like." She thought back to the nights when silence meant punishment, when every unread message meant a fight brewing. Now it meant peace. She felt her shoulders relax, the weight of his shadow lifting fully. Claire raised a glass and said, "To freedom." Emily laughed, a sound that felt new, but also familiar, as though it had been waiting. For once, the night was not about survival, but about living. Later, as Emily prepared for bed, her phone buzzed. The sound once sent ice through her veins, but now it only made her smile faintly. She whispered, "Not fear anymore." The screen lit with a simple message, someone thanking her for speaking out. She placed the phone face down on the nightstand, no longer a weapon, no longer a chain. She turned off the light and let the darkness embrace her. The final blow was not his, it was hers, reclaiming silence and turning it into safety. She whispered once more, "He can never fool me again." And the night closed gently around her, carrying not fear, but freedom.